Good morning, everyone, and thank you for tuning in for our fourth and final Schuylkill Strong discussion series. This is an ongoing project that SARCC has been implementing since the start of 2021 to help build affirming conversations, critical conversations, and challenging conversations that will ultimately make Schuylkill County a stronger, safer, and more resilient community. And I am so excited to have a special guest with us today. Mikaela Gavaletz is joining us from Youth Empowerment and Support of Schuylkill County. And I'm going to turn it over to her in just a minute to introduce herself and the work that she's doing in the community. And then we'll have an ongoing discussion this morning about affirming with pride. So June is Pride Month, which means that it is an excellent time for us as a community to take stock and look at ways that we can create inclusive and affirming spaces for individuals who identify as LGBTQ plus in our community. And our hope is that we will have concrete examples of ways that organizations or individuals can show up to create these affirming spaces in our community. I also want to take a moment to thank St. Luke's and Geisinger for supporting this conversation. When we contacted different outlets in the community about this idea of holding the Schuylkill Strong discussion series, St. Luke's and Geisinger was really quick to jump on board. They really saw the value of holding critical and challenging conversations and building our community's capacity for them. And they also really quickly wanted to be a part of this affirming with pride conversation and explicitly said, this is important to us and this is important to our community and we would like to be a part of it. And so we send a huge thank you out to St. Luke's and Geisinger for supporting this particular conversation and for being a part of this this network building and this intentionality around building inclusive spaces and affirming spaces for LGBTQ plus and identified individuals. And so now I'm going to welcome our special celebrity guest for Schuylkill County's Schuylkill Strong discussion, someone who I've gotten to know over the past year, and I've just really appreciated the opportunity to get to know her and the incredible work and the powerhouse work that she is doing in this community. Mikaela Gavaletz, welcome, and I'm going to turn it over to you if you would like to introduce yourself. And yes, I think our viewers would love to hear about it.
Thank you, Allie. It's always a pleasure seeing you and speaking with you. You're such an inspiration to me, too. So back at you. As Allie mentioned, I am Mikaela Gavaletz. I go by the pronouns she, her. I am the Executive Director of Youth Empowerment Support, which is still under development. And this is a program that will benefit our area's children, youth, teens, young adults, with resources and help finding the connections that they need to come to the community and thrive. I'm also the creator, founder, and executive director of Pottsville Pride Fest, and we'll be having our wonderful, and I'll fill in details later on, we'll be having our event on July 17th of this year. A little out of Pride Month, but so many other Pride events going on, and there's only so many weekends in June, so we got bumped to July, and that's fine. We're gonna have a party. So. Yeah.
And Pride goes all year long. It's not just 1 month of the year, right?
Absolutely, yes, I agree with that. And it's just a message of inclusion and just tolerance and hope for everybody in this area. Something that growing up in Pottsville as a kid in the 70s. I didn't have the benefit of, and I believe that has been the case throughout the decades as I've been away out in Southern California for a while and come back to find no representation. just took a little time for me to settle in before I stepped up, and here I am.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And on the stage and ready to go, right?
Always.
Yeah. One of the things that I just love about every Pride Fest or Pride celebration that I have been to is this overwhelming sense of celebration. Pride is first and foremost about celebrating identity, celebrating space, and celebrating connection for LGBTQ and other identities along the gender and sexual orientation spectra. And when you come into a Pride Fest, it is just palpable the joy that you feel in that space. Have you found that too?
Oh, I always talk about this, and it makes me cry. It was nothing short of magical what occurred last year, and it happened so quickly, so organically. I had no idea what would come of this. I figured it would be a success if we drew 25 people, within a week and a half's time in putting Pride Fest last year together. Much to my surprise, the attendance topped 525 people for the whole day. Of course, 250 at a time due to COVID restrictions. We were just lifted into the green phase and were allowed to have outdoor gatherings. You have 250 people, and that was it. But anyway, people waited to get in and had a wonderful time. And the most surprising aspect of last year was the amount of young people who were there discovering themselves. They found a community. They found leadership within the community. It was something I did not expect, but it happened, and I'm still hearing about this almost a year later from parents, from just instant messages of people out on the streets thanking me for what I had done. And it's just like, wow, I don't know what I had done. It was something that was born of a passion and pent up frustration, I guess, of standing on the sidelines and watching things happen instead of making things happen. And I just decided after last year's atrocities of, the loss of a couple trans sisters of color, one most notably in the Philadelphia area, that kind of pushed me over the edge. It's a little bit emotional for me. That's how Pride was born. It was, I was going to start out being, a march and a rally. Kind of parallels how Stonewall and Pride started as a riot, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't planning on having a riot, but a rally and a march that evolved into Pride, and it was a miracle, and I was so happy to have led that charge, because standing on the sidelines for far too long, remaining silent was no longer enough for me. So I'm glad I brought it to Schuylkill County, and the payoff, the payoff is how these kids are looking forward to this year's, Pride, and how much hope we've installed in them between working with SARCC and doing the panel discussion that I did. Thank you for that invitation. It has been it's been a wild ride for 2020 and 2021, and I'm just happy to be here today to share that with you all.
Yeah, it's powerful and it's moving. And I think one of the things that you said just really resonates with me. When we remain silent or kind of brush things to the side or assume that our community is not ready for something, then that kind of does two things. So first of all, our community misses out on the joy and the celebration that comes along with those affirming conversations. But it also sends it, I think, often an unintentional but very impactful side message to individuals in our community that who they are, their identities, that they're not welcome, that they can't be talked about. And so when we intentionally make that shift instead to, we see that this is here, we value that this is here, and it is important that we talk about gender identity and sexual orientation and what healthy relationships and access and connection look like within the community for LGBT plus identified individuals, it makes a huge difference. And we've seen that at SARCC, and I'm curious to hear what you've seen through your work with Yes this past year too. When we start to talk about it, when we hold groups that are intentional, so like we held our group together with Yes and the LGBT Center of Greater Reading for trans and gender nonconforming, gender non-binary individuals, what we're hearing from folks is that when there's no space carved out for this in our communities. And so to have this space carved out, to have folks, whether it's an organization or individuals or community members or groups, say, this is important and we see you and it's valuable and we celebrate it. And all of the challenge and the incredible hope and resilience that comes along with it, it's powerful. And we see that with our healing work with survivors of sexual violence as well. So go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I didn't want to catch up, but yeah, you're absolutely right. And, a safe space for, the LGBTQ community has been something that Pottsville was void of for many decades, from the time I was a child, roaming the streets, wondering, where I can go, who am I, what am I, who can explain this to me, I had no idea what was going on inside of me, but, I had no community, I had a library, and I did, as much research as a kid, only to turn up one, book about Christina Jorgensen, the world's first, transgender, celebrity there was, back in the 50s. So, that really didn't resonate fully with me because here I was a child, and and trying to name to what afflicted me. Not to have that kind of representation in this community in 2021 is to me, in my opinion, acceptable, and it's time for community to come together, have a safe space for our youth, to gather, to meet each other, to discuss, what's going on in today's socio-political environment and in the school hallways. And so they need a place. They need a place with representation of leadership, of counsel, and so this is what Yes was born of. After seeing what I saw at last year's, it just clicked. It just became clear to me that this is what I had to try to spearhead, to try to bring a brick and mortar facility to, not just Schuylkill County in general, but from what I've been hearing, there's a local psychiatrist whose caseload is way over the top. People waiting to talk to her about, their trans issues or their non-binary issues or their gender non-conforming issues or whatever it is that's on. So there is a need for a safe space for these youth, these teens, these young adults, and even adults. I mean, there are some late transitioners myself, and they need answers too. So it's very important that we get Yes off the ground and active in the community because this is long awaited and it's, the kids are waiting. And we're going to push this and make it a beautiful Pride this year.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think we've found as we've started this work and these conversations is that a lot of times people, even really well-intentioned folks, don't have the language that they need to talk about things like sexual orientation or gender identity. We had an event for SARCC just over the weekend, and someone was talking with me and saying, "Oh, I saw the group you did for transgender individuals, and I had no idea what gender non-conforming meant, and I had to go and look it up." And so I wonder, how do we define something like sexual orientation? Or maybe we should start with gender identity, since I know you've done a lot of research on that and have great expertise around there. What is gender identity, and what language is important that folks use around gender identity?
Okay, great question. Gender identity is expressing who you know you are, your heart and your mind, and maybe even your chromosomes, maybe just a little bit, wired to have you, you know, it's expressing, who you are on the inside, who you've always known, you are. It's your gender, as perceived by yourself, and the way that you put it out there to the world. Whereas sexual orientation is of course your attraction to whoever it is you're attracted to, a person. It doesn't matter what gender, it's who you're attracted to.
So I'm sharing my screen now. We had found and started sharing information on the gender unicorn. Is that, actually, that's not a great picture of it, but the gender unicorn, I'm going to stop my share and find a better one, is a way of defining many different elements of gender identity and sexual orientation and gender expression, and kind of outlines the let's see if I can find a better one. Outlines that there are many different elements of identity, and that different people fall along a spectrum of identity. So I think that the traditional conception, or what we have heard about for a really long time, or what was socially accepted to talk about, was that there's two genders, and it's male and female, and sexual orientation and sexuality and sexual relationships fit within these two boxes. And in reality, for the entirety of human history, it's never been that simple, right? And people and cultures have more nuanced understandings of what that looks like and how that looks for people and for identities. And that there's a difference between who you are attracted to, or who you love, or who you want to have a sexual relationship with, and who you perceive yourself to be. And those things all fall along different spectra for different people. So let's see if I can pull this up and share it. And I would love to get your thoughts on it. I don't know if you've done the gender unicorn activity at any point with through Yes or anywhere else. No,
I have not, but I'm interested in seeing what's about.
It's good stuff. So the gender unicorn basically talks about how gender identity is who you think you are. So like the unicorn is thinking about who the person is, or who the unicorn is, and how they define themselves. Gender expression is along the outside, so how the unicorn presents or dresses or shows who they are to the world outside. So the world can see the gender expression, but they may not be able or cannot see the gender identity, because that's how the unicorn thinks of themselves. And then it also talks about the sex assigned at birth, and how there can be sex assignment that is even outside of male or female. And then finally, talks about attraction, and that you can be both physically and emotionally attracted to another person, and that can shift for people over time. So I think we lost our co-host. So I am going to give Mikaela just a moment to jump back in. And in the meantime, I'll share a few tips about SARCC and some of our concrete work to enhance our affirming space and our inclusive space for LGBTQ plus identified individuals and communities. So this work actually started several years ago at this point, where our staff intentionally brought in educators and consultants to talk with us about gender identity and gender expression and what that looks like and how that shows up in organizations and spaces. Mikaela, welcome back to the studio. I started sharing a little bit about some of SARCC's journey to build inclusive and affirming spaces and how we started by bringing in outside experts and presenters and consultants to help us learn the language of gender identity, of gender expression, of physical and emotional attraction and sexual orientation, and words and language to use, but also really concrete ways that we can show up as an organization. So whether it's paying attention to what we're posting on our social media, what shows up on our website. If you ever look at my email signature, I include my pronouns on it and some really concrete things like that send the message that we're an organization that knows that sharing and asking pronouns is an important thing and worthwhile. And I wonder, do you have any other ideas about what organizations can do to send the message that LGBTQ plus identified individuals are welcome and have space there and are seen there?
Well, what I feel is the strongest tool is just going out into the public and educating. I've had numerous rounds of discussions with area local business people, government organizations, Penn State Schuylkill campus. So just getting out and doing some old-fashioned stumping around and meeting people and educating. Being out in public for me right now has been something of a pleasure because of the amount of people who know, through Facebook or any social media, they're seeing my image and they know who I am coming up there, expressing, I'm sorry, a phone call came in. Okay, we're good. So just seeing people and answering their questions. I mean, education is everything. Visibility is the key, along with education. So social media is one thing. You can get involved in many different organizations out there. PA Trans Equality, in my case, in speaking with children, youth that are there are many different outlets that you can meet people and discuss. Powered by Rainbows, I believe, a local media guru, Matt Haslam, has the space where he has a lot of participation in group discussions and videos that he does that help people throughout the whole LGBTQ spectrum. So there are various organizations out there that are inclusive and diverse and may have somebody on staff that can talk to, but I've been involved in some of those organizations in one way, shape, or form as a resource. So people, these organizations just send them to me, and I'll say, hey, look, what's the sitch, and we'll suit you up with the organization that best fits.
Absolutely. So when talking about the different organizations or the different access points where people can be.
Can't hear you.
Oh, I'm not muted. Hold on.
Hold on. I have to reset. Hold on, Allie.
Is that any better?
Hopefully I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Sorry about the technical difficulties.
That's okay. It's part of technology in the COVID age. Can you hear me? All right, so as Mikaela works through her technical difficulties, we'll bring her back into the studio. In the meantime, one of the things that we have found is really useful for connection, especially during the COVID age, is providing opportunities for individuals who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or any of the other identities that sort of fit along the gender expression and sexuality spectrum to connect with one another in ways that that maybe prior to COVID wouldn't have been possible. So SARCC entered into an agreement with the LGBT Center of Greater Reading and held a number of different support groups that were targeted and able to provide connections and opportunities for folks who identify as LGBTQ+, and then a targeted group that was specific for trans and gender, non-conforming gender, non-binary individuals. And as we did that, we used, communication tools to send out activities, to hold discussions, to bring individuals together from the three different communities that we were serving. So it was Lebanon County, Schuylkill County, and Berks County when all was said and done. And the folks who participated were able then to discuss along the way their own experiences with living in the communities that they lived in, and what was needed and what was missing for folks who identified as LGBTQ+ in those communities. Mikaela, are you back with us? All right, well, as she works through that, I am going to share a little bit of information about the Pottsville Pride Fest, just so if anyone is interested in looking into participating that day or with that event, you'll be able to see and check it out. So Mikaela mentioned this earlier in our stream. The Pottsville Pride Fest is going to take place in Pottsville on July the 17th. So it's Saturday, July 17th. And it's an afternoon to evening event and pretty much an all-day event. So if you have not participated in the Pottsville Pride Fest, it is a great opportunity to participate in that resilience building, the celebration and the joy of different identities and experiences within the Schuylkill County community. And as Mikaela mentioned earlier in the broadcast, this is one event that last year, very last minute, so just a few weeks of planning, brought in over 500 participants to the Pride Fest event that took place last year, and we're hoping to participate in this again this year. So organizations like SARCC participated as vendors at the Pottsville Pride Fest, and that can happen again. So if you are interested in coming in as a vendor to the Pride Fest, you can contact Mikaela And Mikaela, I'm going to ask you to share your contact information for folks who are interested in being vendors at this year's Pride Fest. But I wanted to really highlight that as one way that organizations can really show up and demonstrate that they are working toward inclusivity, working to build affirming space for LGBTQ plus identified individuals and communities, is by showing up at these community events that center the voices and experiences of the community and really celebrate the power and the resilience that goes into being a part of this community in an area where there are really limited resources and limited connection.
I must apologize for my technical difficulties. I had no audio forever, and I had to reboot everything and turn other Wi-Fi sources off, and I lost everything. But I'm happy to see that.
It's all good. You're back, and I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Am I what?
Can you hear me now?
I can. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay.
You're all good.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Sometimes earbud technology is not the best way to go. So I'm completely disconnected from that. But thank you for sharing the information on Pride Fest. And I'm sorry I missed half the dissertation here. So
it's okay. I was just sharing that Pride Fest is coming up, that it was an event that drew over 500 participants last year, as you mentioned earlier in the stream, and that this is a great opportunity for organizations, for businesses, or for individuals to come out and to start showing up at community events that are specifically carved out for the space and the safety for LGBTQ plus identified individuals. And do you have any thoughts or guidance for organizations that are maybe looking to participate in something like Pottsville Pride Fest for the first time?
There's plenty of opportunities to come, as a vendor, or be a sponsor. We have a lot of great sponsors for this year's Pride Fest. SARCC being one of them. Your presence at Pride Fest is always welcomed. You're a powerhouse organization, and so happy to be affiliated with you. We have a lot of great local businesses and organizations like yourself, Allie, that are supporting Pride Fest, and the vendors will be spread out throughout the whole venue. We've got a load of vendors coming in. So anything that's that can you can do to help support local small business or artists for that matter, which to me is very near and dear as far as support of our local art community. Myself being a graphic designer, I know what it's like to get exposure and your work to be seen. So we hope that you not only show up as an attendee, but if you want, you can contact me. My name, Mikaela Gavaletz, at youthempowermentsupport.org. So if you're interested in participating as a vendor or a sponsor, contact me through that means, or find me on Facebook. I guess the Pride site is Pride 50 Years in Celebrating. So that'll take you to the page that'll give you all the information that you need. I believe the graphic that Allie has up on the screen right now is a good page too. I believe I put all the information on that. If I'm good, I did. Put all the contact information there and the directions to the venue, which is at General George Jolwin Eastside Park, and the Lions Club Amphitheater. Mm-hmm. And it's here in Pottsville. It's on Schuylkill Manor Road, stuff Norwegian. And if you're familiar with Pottsville at all, right in between the Sunoco and the CVS, up the hill past LVHN, take a left and go up to the venue. It's very easy to find.
You give directions the same way I give directions.
Yes, landmarks, right?
Yes, it's the only way. It's the only sure, tried and true way to do it.
I'll have signs up that way to guide you all, but and I've said the link to the venue is also present on one of these 2 pages. If not, if I did my job right, both of them. So.
Great. So one of the things that I know we really, as an organization, thought about in starting to do our intentional outreach was making sure that we were not only showing up in spaces, but trying to be culturally informed as we show up in new spaces and in new communities as SARCC. So we didn't want to just like roll in and be like, we're SARCC and this is what we do. And, aren't you glad we're here? We wanted to learn a little bit about the communities that we were working to connect with, and what the needs are and what we could bring that were really valuable. One of the things with Pride Fest, I'll give a really concrete example. So we do a lot of work around sexual violence prevention. And with something like a Pride Fest, which is very much about celebrating and I don't know, like finding joy and building connection. If we rolled into Pride Fest with like, did you know that LGBTQ plus populations are at increased risk for sexual violence? Like it could be like really hard information. We would be bringing information that could potentially not fit within the context of the purpose itself. And so when we show up, when we roll into Pride Fest, we're always who we are, but we're bringing information on healthy relationship building and consent and joyful sexuality and all the ways that those fit in the prevention of sexual violence model. And I wonder, I'm sure other organizations are really thinking about that. So what are some tips for organizations that want to participate in Pride Fest, but maybe haven't been a part of one before? How can they show up with the best intentions at Pride Fest 2021?
Well, showing up is, 90%.
It's the first step. Just show up.
Just show up and show your support. Have staff available that could represent your organization or business, the best, and talk to them and let them know that you're here to support these people and know that you're available. You look at some of the statistics out there with let's say right off the top of my head, the Trevor Project reports and the statistics that come up and having to do with wellness, just well-being in not only mentally but physically, as you stated. Abuse runs rampant in our community. Sexual, bullying, all the, so we need people out there to, assure our community, that, we do exist, that kind of support exists. And, just, like I said, just show up, be a part of the contact me. I welcome that.
So you brought up the Trevor report, which is something that I have seen just so much information about that is incredibly relevant to any medical provider, human service provider, mental health organization. There's so much and such rich information through this recent Trevor Project report. I think it's really of value. So when we look at all the organizations that do work within Schuylkill County, trying to make it a safer and a healthier Schuylkill County, you look at, for instance, suicide prevention work. So there are a lot of different organizations or care providers or individuals who care deeply about suicide and wanting to make sure that youth suicide especially is not something that runs rampant in Schuylkill County. And some of the great research from this Trevor Project report actually talked about use of pronouns and what a simple thing that is, but what a big difference that it makes. Do you have any reflections on that?
I do. Validation is everything, especially to somebody that's transgender. I wish I can speak more diligently on the topic of just being, gay or lesbian or bi, but I identify solely as being a woman. If I have to put a label on it, trans woman, but it is from as far back as I can remember, being addressed as Miss, Ma'am, or whatever just meant a lot to me, and it really felt good to be validated that way, and that's just a simple way of making somebody feel good about themselves and confident and welcomed is just by using the proper pronoun. We all identify somewhere on the gender spectrum. And Allie, I know you touched on it, earlier. The broad spectrum and the history that goes, as far back as recorded, history goes in cultures and societies throughout time. There has been, great recognition for transgender people, no matter what they called their people, in their tribes or in their cultures or in their societies. It's always been a thing. It's real. Life flows, and so does, gender identity and sexual orientation. It's something that we can all, expand on if we, take a few minutes and do some research and know that validation is everything. Yeah, and I've experienced it, and it makes it just really good. So.
Great. And it's not just a feel-good thing either. It's letting someone know that you see them, that you see who they are, that you validate who they are, and the difference that makes for mental health, for emotional health, for that sense of safety in an organization is just huge. So allowing individuals to have structural or systematic ways or spaces that they can disclose their pronouns, that we're asking things like gender identity or sexual orientation at intake or things like that. Those are ways and places where we can build affirming and inclusive responses that really make a huge difference, not only in the long run for service provision or for support within the organization, but I don't know, sending the message to the community at large that that's important to you.
Absolutely. Growing up here in Schuylkill County and, in the Pottsville area, sometimes I feel like I'm, in this protective bubble, in a sense that, I mean the people of Schuylkill County and most definitely Pottsville. My family watched me on Friday nights under the Friday night lights. Here's Mikaela, the high school footballer, and that's a big thing in this area. So they knew who I was when I moved back here from Southern California. However, they were about to, receive a big dose of reality that that I'd evolved. That I decided to just be the person that I always knew. I was, and not the person that I was forced to be in society, because those are the rules, I just happen to, follow the laws of nature more than the laws of man when it comes to dictating, what you do with your body, who you are, how you identify, and who you love. So I more or less listen to the laws of nature in that regard. So I believe that people protect me here because they saw that kid running around on the football field, scoring touchdowns and throwing touchdown passes or whatever, and they see that, wow, if this happened to Michael, my dead name, it could happen to anybody in a sense. So it did jar a lot of people, but what came from it afterwards was the beautiful thing, everybody wanted to know the story, and I was happy to share it. And that really led to my being, an activist, a trans activist, as I realized, how the kids are impacted more and more in this area. So I just want to be a voice for them. I want to be a force for them, and help them, assimilate and hopefully educate the people who want to be educated.
Well, it's incredible work that you're doing. So what can an individual who identifies as LGBTQ do to find connection and support here in Schuylkill County? Would you be willing to share some of your lessons learned and what's available right now?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, I like organizations like the Rainbow Alliance. They're very, very helpful and online, and it deals with a lot of topics, not only trans, but of course anything under the LGBTQ community. For this area, that's who I would look up, as well as the PA Trans Equality people. Now they're a little bit more toward the northeastern sector of our part of Pennsylvania, but I'm trying to form an alliance with them as well to become a better, more well-rounded source of information. And so those are two that I would look into to start with. The Rainbow Alliance, of course, is always PFLAG. They're not really represented in this area that I'm aware of. I mean, if you are out there, I mean, I certainly hope that you would reach out to me and let me know that, because I've not found any evidence. So. Youth empowerment and support is all about that, and resources, and hopefully one day a brick and mortar safe space where people come to study, to be who they are, to connect with people that are like them. So that's important for the youth of this community to know that they have a community within the community. And that would be, all theirs, to, take it to wherever they want to drive it. So hopefully we can be the premier network in this area for, outreach and resources. So we're off to a good start.
Absolutely. So just so folks know, Youth Empowerment and Support is a newly forming nonprofit organization in Schuylkill County, and they are responsible first and foremost for Pottsville Pride Fest, which is coming up on July 17th for 2021. They also, as an organization, I'm just going to do the summary, have educational programs and opportunities. So Mikaela has gone out and talked with organizations, with human service providers about LGBTQ plus and trans identity issues and topics and what's needed, and creating affirming space in the community. And also last year was a part of a virtual conference on these different topics and areas, and brought just a wealth of presenters and information from across the country, actually, to
and Canada.
And Canada. So international presenters, and Mikaela and Youth Empowerment Support partnered with SARCC and with the LGBT Center of Greater Reading to do some of these virtual support groups as well. So we've done a Cultivating Strength group that's arts and healing focused and trauma and resilience focused. I know you ran a very successful trans and gender nonconforming group in the winter, and I think the plan is to bring that back for the summer as well.
Yes.
Yay! So that is coming up. We're working on getting dates for that. So any individual who's interested in being a part of those groups or programs, you can reach out either to Mikaela Gavaletz at youthempowermentsupport.org, or reach out to SARCC at info@sarcheels.org, and we'll get you connected with the folks who are planning those groups and programs. And we look forward to seeing what more comes out of Youth Empowerment Support as time goes on, and as you build your organization and your brick and mortar setting for connection.
Absolutely. I'm excited, Allie, and you're a big part of the success driving forward, and I love working with you. And thanks for having me on this talk today. Sorry I missed half of it because of technical difficulties.
You didn't miss half of it. It felt longer than it was. It was a small blip of technical difficulties.
Right, when you're panicking, it always seems like it's a much longer time. Right?
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for being a part of this discussion and sharing some of your story. I was so moved to hear how just some really hurtful and painful things were the things that led you to do some incredible and transformative work in the community. And I think that that's the power of healing and resilience that we see at SARCC every day. So it really resonated with me.
Yes. And, and I'm just, I'm very pleased to be affiliated with SARCC. Again, I can't express that, anymore. And of course with you, Allie, so thanks.
Oh, thank you. Well, thanks all folks who tuned in to our fourth and final Schuylkill Strong discussion. We want to give one final thank you to St. Luke's and Geisinger for supporting this conversation and recognizing how important it is that we have these good and challenging and growth-based conversations in our community. And please reach out to SARCC, to Youth Empowerment Support, or to the Pottsville Pride Fest page to get more information or learn how you can show up for LGBTQ plus communities in our community this year.
Excellent.
Thanks, Mikaela. Everyone, have a great day.
Thank you, Anne.
Bye-bye.
Bye.